In this video, we'll break down why growth is secretly working against your creativity, the psychology of how success rewires your brain, and lastly, the systems you need to scale without losing your spark. And by the end, you'll see why protecting your creative freedom is the only true measure of real success. But success is deceptive. The more people watch, the more your brain associates external validation with creative worth. In psychology, this is known as the operant conditioning, basically stating when your brain ties the act of creating to the reward of approval, not the joy of expression. And this is where the paradox begins, because you start creating from less of the flow state and more of the state of fear, because now you have the fear of not performing, the fear of not outdoing your last video, and the fear of disappointing the audience that once loved you for simply being you. And I want to share this chart with you. This is called the paradox curve, but in the instance of this video, we're going to call it the creator's paradox curve. On this graph, the x-axis represents growth. The y-axis tracks two forces: creative freedom and operational obligation. At the start, creative freedom is super high and obligation is very low. You experiment, you explore, you create without fear. But as growth compounds, obligations start to rise. Why is that? Because now you have expectations. Maybe you have a team that requires meetings and management. And maybe you finally have an offer to give to your audience, which returns in having to give deliverables. All of those steal from your creativity. So creative freedom starts to decline because your cognitive bandwidth gets restricted from creating to managing creation. These two lines intersect at what I call the creator's paradox point. The moment your creative output is at its highest, but your joy is at its lowest. This happens because the brain's dopamine pathways shift from anticipation to maintenance. You stop chasing ideas and you start maintaining identity. The paradox isn't external, it's internal because it's neurological. Your success literally rewires how your brain experiences satisfaction. Now, before we go further into this video, I have a content creation agency that manages over 5 million subscribers on YouTube. I do very well. I do these videos to just talk about the things that I have seen inside of my agency over the last 7 years. And over the last 7 years, this paradox has been something that I have seen happen to a select few of clients. And with the select few of clients who have had this paradox rule them, they ended up stopping the production of content. So all of the lessons that I teach here on this channel are just filtered thoughts that I decided to write about that I've noticed inside of the real world. So as we go further into this video, these are all things that I have seen and tried to formulate my ideas around it. I've written all this out and I've put it all here together, not only to make videos to show you guys on what happens to these successful creators, but more importantly, to help me understand what's happening to them. So now let's get right back to the point of all this. I just had to give you some context so you understand why I'm making this and the rest of this video. So according to the self-determination theory, intrinsic motivation thrives on 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The moment you start creating from the place of validation, autonomy dies. And there's a really good quote, and it says something like this: "Man is not destroyed by suffering, he is destroyed by suffering without meaning." So without autonomy, every act of creation becomes a performance, and performance eventually kills play. This is why, as an athlete, or let's use myself for instance, I grew up a skateboarder. It was my passion. When I had to perform for skateboarding, it no longer became play. It became work. And I skated at a pretty high level. I was definitely probably the best at any given skate park 3 days out of the week, and I would do competitions, and when competitions became the involvement, the play of skateboarding left. And this is the same thing that happens with professional athletes. When they're out there on the courts and they're shooting around, it's fun, they're playing. But now you put them in a stadium and put 1,000 people around them, the play doesn't become a play, it becomes a performance. And this is the same thing that happens with creation. When you don't have that autonomy and people are watching you, there's no longer the play in the very thing you're doing, which brings me to this chart here. This chart here is the identity drift map. And let me walk you through it because it's very important you understand this. On the left side of the graph is the authentic creation, which means content driven from curiosity and expression, which is the root of all creation. On the right side, you have the performance creation, which is driven by metrics and validation, which means every new follower adds a subtle pressure. And every new pressure is subtly pushing the creator on the rightward along the spectrum. The line represents a psychological drift from expression to expectation. This isn't laziness, this is neural conditioning, because your reward system gets hijacked by feedback loops like comments, likes, engagement, each triggering microdopamine hits. And over time, your brain starts optimizing for predictability instead of novelty. The results are safer ideas, lower fulfillment, and the illusion of progress. And that is the identity drift. You didn't lose your creativity, it just got buried under your brand. Because once you have a brand to uphold, as I stated earlier, you have obligations and you don't have that freedom that you once had when no one was watching. Which is why I love this channel, because the good news about this channel is no one's watching, so I can act and speak how I want. Eventually that may change, but for now I have the freedom to just speak openly and uncandidly and not care about the settings. I'm literally on my porch with my hoodie on, scratching my face, moving around, fidgeting, not caring, because no one's watching. That's the good news, but also the bad news. Now let's go to section 3. This is the freedom formula, because this is where if you master, you can find the leverage to continue and keep that creative juice flowing. Because what freedom really means is leverage minus obligation. Because if you have leverage coupled with obligation, you don't have freedom. The very act of being obligated is the very absence of freedom. So freedom is leverage minus obligation. Leverage is everything that multiplies your effort. Systems, automations, teams, and content libraries, and so forth. Obligation, though, on the other hand, is everything that consumes your energy, which would be revisions, people pleasing, because now you have a service or product, meetings, because now you have a team to uphold the brand, and so forth. Anything that is consuming your energy. The brain only has so much cognitive load. So when obligations grow faster than leverage, burnout is essentially inevitable. But when leverage compounds faster than obligation, you enter what neuroscientists call the flow projected state, where your time is spent almost entirely on high dopamine and high competence tasks. There's a really good quote done by Bruce Lee, and it says something like this: it's not daily increase, but daily decrease. So hack away at the unessential. At the core of that quote, hacking away at the unessential as you grow as a content creator is the most important thing, because it's going to allow you to stay in your creative genius and remove you from using your creative genius to build out emails and automations and lead capture forms and things of that sort. And even managing team, that's a very hard part. I've had my business for 7 years and I've had all the way upwards of 12 employees. We're startup, small level. I've had 12 employees and I maintain about 5 employees at all times. And we just tinker around that area. And of course I have contractors and stuff like that. But the more people I get, the more I think I'm going to free myself. But really the more I manage and the less I'm able to free myself working on things that really just drain me and don't make me want to keep working on building out a team. Because my favorite thing about a business is being able to talk about the very things that got me here, because I love expression. I think it's a great form of art. Now that rambles out of the way, let's talk about this freedom versus obligation, because that's the core essence of this all. So I have this chart here called the freedom versus obligation. And this graph shows 2 lines. One is leverage rising and the other is obligation trying to catch up. The green area between both of them is your creative freedom gap. In the beginning, both are low. You're doing everything yourself. But as your systems evolve, leverage compounds exponentially while obligations should grow linearly. If that balance inverse, that means obligations overtake your leverage, which means your creative bandwidth starts to collapse. And this is why creators with teams still burn out, because they outsource tasks but not decision fatigue, because you still have to make loads of decisions. So the real freedom isn't about hiring more people, it's about reducing cognitive drag. The most successful creators don't delegate for convenience, they delegate to preserve this state of flow, which is the very thing that I try to optimize for. If I can outsource that, I don't have to think about making decisions. I don't want to make decisions. I don't want people to ask me, Matt, what do we do here? What about this? I just find the most ROI on a hire or value of somebody inside of a team is their ability to just do something and then just say, hey, here's what I made. And if you have to give a revision, so be it. It's way better than giving a revision versus having to tell them what to do. Having to tell people what to do is one of the worst, tedious things. It also shows that the person is not that competent to take direction in their own manners to aid the whole team. If you have that inside of your business, finding that bottleneck and fixing it could free up that flow state for you. And it may allow you to get back into a state of creativity because now you're not being exhausted by decision fatigue. And with that small story, that brings me to section 4. And I used MrBeast as a case study because MrBeast is basically the YouTube machine in his regard. So he scaled faster than any creator in history, but he also nearly broke under it. In his earliest interviews, he said his happiest time was when he had nothing but time. Now he runs an entire empire and spends most of his days managing people instead of filming. The difference is that he didn't escape the paradox, he systemized it. His team doesn't replace his creativity, it multiplies it. He built a machine that amplifies his curiosity instead of suffocating it. That is the key. Scale the environment, not the ego. Now that brings me to section 5, and this is called the creator compass, because there are 4 attributes to being a creative powerhouse. And when any of those attributes become out of balance, you infringe on your creative abilities. So let's talk about how creativity operates like a biological cycle, because it needs space to oscillate between focus and recovery, curiosity and reflection. To sustain that, you need what I call the creator compass, which is why I made this. There are 4 directions. The first is curiosity, which fuels innovation. The second is authenticity, which grounds your message. The third is systemization, which preserves your energy. And the last is reflection, which renews your perspective. If you lose one, your creative direction starts to collapse. So I want you to imagine this for a moment. Imagine a compass with those 4 quadrants: curiosity, authenticity, systemization, reflection. Each represents a psychological pillar of sustainable creation. Curiosity activates dopamine, which is the ignition. Authenticity aligns identity, which is the steering. Systemization regulates effort, which is the engine, and reflection engages the default mode network, which recharges the cycle. When you maintain among all 4 of these, you create clarity, not chaos. But when one overpowers another, say systemization without reflection, then creativity becomes mechanical and not meaningful. That's when burnout appears as productive, which in most cases, that is often the time. People tend to get burned out and they think they've just been so busy, but really they're burned out because they haven't made distance with their busyness, because they're running in circles. You don't get burned out with progress, because progress fuels you and recharges that compass. That is why burnout essentially takes place. Which brings me to the takeaway of this all. The creator's paradox isn't punishment. It's proof that you've grown. It's the universe asking whether you want to stay a creator or become a manager to your own machine. Growth will always create friction, but friction can polish or destroy you, depending on whether you build around it or you fight it. Protect your curiosity the way you protect your income, because the moment you stop exploring is the moment you stop evolving. This is not a curse. This is something every creator must go through. And if you do go through it, I want you to pat yourself on the back, because you have grown so much to the point in which this is a reality. Creators who never get to this point have not grown, because this point in time only comes when scale is at place. So if you're a creator or an entrepreneur who's starting to feel that friction, don't take it as a sign to quit. Take it as a sign to systemize. Use all the information in this video to give you guidance and reassure you you're doing the right thing and you're on the right path. Stay in your creative genius and allow that to be your North Star, because it's the very thing that got you to where you are now. If this helped you, share it with somebody else that you think needs to hear this message, because you may be the very reason, or this video that you share with them may be the very reason that they continue on their path to unprecedented amounts of success, because content creation will lead you to unprecedented amount of success. Take it from me. I manage over 5 million subscribers, and a lot of my people or clients that I work with on YouTube own 8-figure businesses and have unlocked echelons of existence that people can only dream of. And that is what I aspire to do, not only for myself, but to help others along the way with the videos and the things that I put here. And the last things that I will leave you with that are very important to hear: you don't need to chase freedom. You just need to protect the conditions that made you free in the first place. With that being said, thank you for watching.